advise businesses consider when they're engaging with college age athletes, because they likely haven't, been partnering with this specific population before. So yeah, Cleo, why don't you take it then? First on the business side of things, like and of course you can speak to what the student athlete needs as well.
Yeah, Emily, you're absolutely spot on in saying that, businesses, they really don't have this expertise or history. And of course, many of us don't have a lot of expertise and history when it comes to NIL and NIL compliance, but especially businesses that are thinking about a lot of other things, right? And I think that's one thing that makes us very unique, is that we're kind of that middleman resource, bringing together that business with the student athlete, to where the business isn't the one out there, trying to reach out to student athletes on DMs, figure out the NCAA rules, try to figure out, timing and payment. All of that's in our one-step process and in our platform. So that's one thing. But in terms of actual, what I tell them to consider, NCAA rules, let them know that they exist. They still exist. That rules can prohibit an opportunity. There's still disclosure requirements. So I do tell them to at least plan ahead and at least reach out to us well in advance before the opportunity actually happens and transpires. Because of course we have to abide by state law. And we also tell them to consider the type of student athlete they're dealing with, right? One company's needs for a student athlete may be different from somebody else's, right? So understanding the student athlete, and hopefully through our platform as well, looking at their individual page to learn a little bit more about them and how they can help your business, correct? And then outside of that, student athletes are busy, right? We have time commitments. So it's best to consult, like I said, with the student athlete to see what their time constraint is. Most state policies restrict any type of NIL opportunities happening during official team activities and during class time. And I can tell you, as a former Stanford football student athlete, I was in class or I was on the football field for a lot of time. So trying to figure out when opportunities are available to you, and making this a student athlete first vision.
Great. Atik, what do you feel like, student athletes should be mindful of when they're, entering into contracts, and even from the agency side too, what are you guys mindful of at Excel?
Yeah, I think from the student athlete perspective, one is understanding your brand. And I can only speak to the clients that we represent that foreseeably have larger athletic careers and a larger public scope in their future. So speaking to that, it's never about chasing a dollar for a high level athlete. It's never about it's not a money grab. What it is how can you strategically build a brand, sign marketing deals that is going to continue to grow the image and benefit you down the line. Because the majority of these brands are reaching out to student athletes via Instagram DM or Twitter DM. And if you chomp at every single opportunity, the brand is inevitably going to get diluted. So a big part of this is brand management for the future. The other part of it is, what kind of deal are you signing? Is there guaranteed compensation? Is there just a rev share? If it is a rev share, then the student athlete should know what's precedent in this market, right? Is it going to be a 80-20 rev share? Is it going to be a 70-30 rev share, and not be swindled in that dynamic? And then if it's compensation, chase your market value. Like there's no reason to undersell and not get what you're worth. And this is where the lack of data comes into play, which I'll speak on later. But I mean, to Khalil's point about the time commitment, it's not a professional athlete situation. Like, don't lock yourself into a production day over the course of 3 days. It's impossible. Like you can't have production days during the season for any kind of shoot, right? And locking yourself into a date in a signed contract is dangerous, because you're skirting the lines of like, I can't do this, and then you're breaking the contract, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's always best to review. And my final point here would be patience, because NIL only became legalized July 4th. Most marketing budgets are set in January. We're in Q4 of 2021. I have full belief that in Q1 of 2020, there's going to be a chunk of major brands' marketing budgets cut out purely for NIL. So sit on it, wait. This industry is going nowhere but up.
Great, thank you. Yeah, you made some great points there. one thing I want to ask you about, you mentioned, it's a lot of it is about creating your brand, establishing your brand, and not just, chomping at the bit at getting any little ad from Instagram or deal from Instagram or whatever it may be. Do you think that, should it be the school or should it just be on the student athlete to implement like into the education program? Like, hey, this is more than just now because you're a men's basketball player at Villanova, you can now make some money. This is your brand and you should take it seriously for XYZ reasons. And these are your branding rights. Like, do you think they should be educated on that, or should that just come if you're able to and need legal representation?
I mean, I think it would be great if the school would educate the student athlete on that. I mean, it's just like your existence as a student athlete isn't just that. It's not just the sport you play. Maybe you like to paint, maybe you like to draw, maybe you like to play ping pong, like whatever it is you like on the side. Like, it's not going to be just basketball or just football or just golf, right? There's you can sell your image, and for an athlete that's going to come into maybe more prominence a few years down the line, what NIL is allowing you to do is to create and brand yourself earlier than ever before. And I think that's highly important. I think we're gonna continue to see that, and hopefully schools are explicit in guiding student athletes in the right direction.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think, that's where the athletes who might not play, high profile and high revenue generating sports, the runners, the golfers, swimmers, they may have other, talents or social media presence that's not, directly related to their athletic performance, that, that's where that's the avenue they can take with NIL. So great. Austin, I want to get to you too before our last question here, before we wrap up. What do you kind of think student athletes need to be mindful about when engaging in NIL?
Sure. In our Monday newsletters, we often we give tips to student athletes, and I remember jotting down a couple of those for this. The big one, and this was the first one that when Eric and I first started Optimum Sports Consulting, that was the biggest thing, and AT hinted at it already. A couple contract terms that students might not be familiar with, like in perpetuity and, future earnings, especially if they're slated to turn pro, durations of contracts. I mean, student athletes should not be signing things that they're, if they only, for multiple years, if they know that they're only going to be at school for 1 year, one and done, whatever you'd call it. So obviously understanding those terms, and once you get into those types of things, there, like AT has said, there are people out there, unfortunately, there are businesses out there that will exploit student athletes. I mean, we saw it in the first week of NIL. There was a video game company that student athletes didn't realize that they were signing away their rights in perpetuity. And it was basically, a spinoff of Twitch type thing. And we saw that week one. So, that's only going to happen further if students don't either get either professional representation or even just simply a lawyer to look over the contract. So those terms are important. One thing we're seeing now is morals clauses. If you're going to make money off your name, image, and likeness, your social media is there for the taking, and you're basically now a celebrity. You're a spokesperson 24/7, and that can be tough for student athletes, obviously, because at the end of the day, you're a college student, and everyone makes mistakes. Everyone posts stuff on your social media. But we saw, for example, at UCLA, Jay Toya, his NIL deal got scrapped because of a terrible video that circulated. So morals clauses are there in some new contracts. And then AT took the words right out of my mouth. My final point would be patient. Like he said, July was the start of this. Some of the biggest potential earners that were projected in the spring, April, May, and June, were Olivia Dunn at UCLA, an excellent gymnast who has millions of followers across TikTok and Instagram, and then Paige Buchers, who's an icon at UConn women's basketball. Paige, I'm pretty sure has signed very few, if any, deals. Olivia just signed her second, and we're 4 months into NIL, and her first deal is projected to be well into six figures. So the point is that if you're sought after, there's no need to rush into anything. Selecting the brand that works for you. For example, Olivia had offers, I'm sure, from Nike and big companies, and chose to go to a smaller brand that kind of fit her needs better. So cultivating that brand and being patient is something that we tell student athletes all the time.
Great, thank you. We're coming close to the hour mark here. So just, you guys could just quickly say, you know, we've talked a lot about everything that's gone on so far in just the first 4 to 5 months of NIL. Looking to the future of NIL, you know, where do you think it's going? Maybe what's one thing that's not being talked about right now that you believe will be big in the future? And we probably touched on a lot of things as we go out, but just to kind of give a closing remark on where you think NIL is going. Khalil, if you don't mind starting, go ahead.
Sure. So there is a lot of chatter about the future of NIL. So I'm not sure if I have anything, so to say, new. I do think that we're going to see a proliferation of more student athletes creating their own IP, creating their own trademarks, looking for something, even though, you know, NCAA policies or state policies will say that NIL can't go beyond your student athlete status, right? I think that we're still going to have student athletes that are obviously doing opportunities that are feeding into their professional goals and future aspirations, which is something that I'm a huge advocate for. I think that student athletes should look at this as a 40-year situation rather than the next 4, because you can really set yourself up well to brand yourself. That's the whole, at the end of the day, college athletics is still in higher education. And I think that that's something that we need to let you know, student athletes need to know that. So hopefully they're able to go out and do more in terms of professionally after college athletics through this.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. AT?
Yeah, for me, the one thing I would love to see in the future is a centralized database of these deals and these deal numbers, just because it's hard to get an honest and accurate grasp of the marketplace with the numbers that we see right now. You know, I'm sure we've all seen the Open Doors numbers that they've put out. One, it just comes from the Open Doors marketplace. 2, a lot of those are social media activations and don't take into account the other deals that pop up. I think if there could be some kind of centralized reporting database where these numbers can be public, I think that benefits the athletes because you get a truer market value. It benefits the brands because they can actually strategically enter the space and exactly what they want to do. And it's going to help the schools because, you know, some schools could benefit with numbers showing that, hey, the X school has more visibility than other schools. So it's going to help, I think, in all facets of it and give the entire marketplace a lot more clarity.
Great, thank you. And Austin?
Yeah, just first to echo what AT is saying, I completely agree. The Open Door database, while good, Open Doors database is really good. However, we see very large fluctuations from month to month. Just from August to September, we saw 5% decreases in football, 4% increases in basketball, because we're only looking at Open Doors athletes in schools that use them. I remember Khalil, when I talked to Aiden and Brandon just a month ago, and I actually mentioned the Open Doors data, and they're like, well, our data doesn't exactly reflect this at all. So it matters where you're going. So a central database would be fantastic. I guess my final point, and this relates to NIL, but more college athletics as a whole. I remember a couple months ago when Alston was being decided, Villanova hosted a symposium, and Professor Mark Edelman said that Alston would be decided 9-0 in favor of the student athletes. And a bunch of people were taken aback by that. And he's like, if you follow antitrust litigation, it's going to be 9-0, and this is going to be a big win for the student athletes. I firmly believe that everything that happens in Alston is nothing compared to what could happen in this Johnson versus NCAA case. If the NCAA is considered a joint employer by states and are thus breaking minimum wage laws in this country, nothing that draft constitution, nothing that a federal NLI bill, nothing that a database will be able to deal with compared to if athletic departments will have to pay student athletes the equivalent of a minimum wage or whatever that be. That would definitely put the college athletic model as a whole completely upside down. It doesn't relate directly to NIL, but I think NIL is unfortunately only impacting some students at a variety of different levels, but I think this would impact every student. So I definitely think following the Johnson case in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania over the next couple months, which already looks favorable for the student athletes and the plaintiffs, could be a huge thing for NIL in the next 6 to 8 months.
Great, thank you. Well, I want to thank you guys for taking the time. We covered a lot, and then at the same time, we covered so little. As we know, the NIL space is, still booming, still emerging. And I think if we met again in another 4 months, being 8 to 10 months into NIL, we'd have a whole new slew of questions and conversations we could have. So we really appreciate your insight and your expertise on this area, and we hope, you know, to have you guys on again. So thank you very much.